American news, Canada included, is limited, kind of like worse than Nazi Germany during the war. Oh, yeah. And the bottom line is, because I have been to Antarctica, because I have actually seen the Nazi base and the Viking base from the 14th century, I know that history isn't right, because I've seen discrepancy with my own personal life. Now, when you ask me, do I know about aliens, I would say I can speculate, but I have no personal, experience. So anything I would say about that would be speculation. But I have seen Antarctica, and so I can tell you that history textbooks are absolutely incorrect, because I have personal knowledge on that.
Yeah.
Now, with that said, that's what you're going to get from me, is the straight. So,
I guess last time I was speaking with you, you mentioned something about being on the Nazi base in Antarctica.
Oh, you want to go there? Okay.
Yeah, I do.
Yeah. In 1975, there was a woman that put a team together, military, to look at Antarctica after the nuclear attack that they had done on it back in the 60s with John F. Kennedy. And I knew nothing about any of this. It's not in the history books. I don't know anything about any of that. And I was invited. This was one of the few projects I actually did where I wasn't the lead physicist. I wasn't in charge. See how the light just above my screen is doing my head? Look at how my head glows and now it doesn't.
Halo.
Isn't that weird? Sorry about that. It's just the sun. Is finally we've got sun. Okay. So basically, this was one of the few projects where I wasn't actually in charge of it. I got invited in because of my academic backgrounds in bioluminescence. My part of the project was to figure out how there is light in this underground cavern. It was lit up. And so I got to go to Antarctica in the caverns that are approximately in the center of Antarctica. It's a huge complex. The cave itself that I was in, there were many caves. The one I was in, the primary cave, was over a mile high, had actual weather, clouds, condensation, had rain. I was there during a period when there was actually enough condensation it fell. And my position was to discover how the light could work. I discovered a bacteria that was aligning the caves with bioluminescence, and I've written a technical paper on that, and that will be part of a book I am publishing called Spook Central on the work I did for MRU. I saw a Nazi base abandoned. It was abandoned. That was maybe as many as 19 submarines could be docked in, Then down in an adjoining area further a few miles away, there was a Viking base that had been abandoned in the 14th century. It was like 14th century, I think. I don't know exactly. I can't tell from some of that. It was ruins, and it was ancient ruins, like, boom, there it was. So this facility has been known in history for a long, long time. And my guess is there will be disclosures in the distant future of other events and things that happened there. When I first started talking about that on radio, I got a call from England, and an individual, he was Royal Air Force, that was 10 years older than me. I'm 71, he was in his 80s, and was part of the original strike team in the early 60s. I think it was either 60, maybe 61. They detonated a nuclear warhead. They're from space, even though Sputnik and those things weren't happening yet. you could actually see Antarctica with a big hole in it, where they went in with a nuclear bomb to take the Germans out. And this Air Force guy said something really interesting to me. He said that when they went in, and it was a joint project, the United States and Russia. It was Russia, U.S., and this is 61 now in the Cold War. They went in and they did it, and they took the Germans out, and he said that some of the Germans escaped into lower caverns. And I've never really thought about what that meant in terms of the fact that the metal is almost 100 miles thick. And it's honeycombed all around the world with caves. I live in Grants Pass, Oregon, and, you can access these caves from the surface. You don't have to go down a mile or something like that to get into a deeper cave in the metal. And apparently, he suggested that when they went after them, the Nazis, the ones that escaped, went into deeper caverns than the metal. Now, that's Middle Earth. That is your so-called, I don't know what that means. But I remember in my work, when I first came out of grad school, I remember reading in old Bibles when I was doing my own translations. I remember reading that there were other, besides Noah, that escaped the flood. There was another group that went into underground caverns. And my guess is they may be what we call graves. I don't know where they live so deep in the earth. They have no melanin, that kind of thing. I don't know how that all works. I don't know. I can speculate, but I don't know. What I do know is Antarctica is riddled with caves and thermals. It has a bunch of thermals there that are warm. It's warm. I mean, like 70 degrees from thermal fusions of water. And the cavern systems in Antarctica are so complex and extensive that you can hide in there and never be found. I was impressed with this type of bacteria, which later led me to understand what bioluminescence is, to be distinguished differently. You have different kinds of luminescence. You have VK center luminescence, which is a lattice defect. Then you have electrons at VK centers where it's a mobility thing, and there are different kinds of bioluminescence. And that's what I did my master's on when I was at Delaware. And I have to tell you, life forms are creating light with like bacteria. They actually generate light. We call it bioluminescence, where a certain kind of heat energy, like thermal, would hit the bacteria, and it'll cause it to release electrons in a visible light region. And that's what was happening in Antarctica. You can see down there. Wow. And so in the cavern, without flashlights and things like that, it was like bright. It wasn't bright like our surfaces, but your eyes adjust, and it was like daylight. And
what kind of fog was that?
I'm sorry?
What kind of stuff you're telling me about Antarctica is just fascinating, the fact that you...
Well, Admiral Byrd, I've seen film clips from Russia showing Foo Fighters and jets, technology we didn't have, actually sinking 3 ships.
Yeah.
And so in Antarctica, Byrd in 1948, trying to mop up the Nazis. And they didn't go to Argentina. That's where they went to go to Antarctica. And that sub base actually was quite extensive.
Yeah.
So in terms of your bell and time travel, I don't know how that all works yet. Stay tuned on that.
Yeah. The thing that really, what fascinated me about the Nazis, because as I'm learning about it as a young man, because for whatever reason I was always really into World War II, I studied it. I watched so many documentaries. I read all about it. And as I started to get into some of the occult things that Hitler was up to, it seemed like he was pretty much, he understood what magic was. You know, he understood how he...
Well, they had the Hellfire Club. Look, just like in the movies, the Germans were preoccupied with alternative technologies from previous civilizations. Who built the pyramids? How did that work? That kind of thing. Yeah. Whether or not it was aliens or... I've been to Mexico, and the ruins I've seen down in Popo is unbelievable. I mean, we're talking about a city underground now that they're just now unearthing, bigger than New York City. And the technologies of that still existing without made out of steel and da-da-da-da-da. It's, pre-Mayan, I think there's things going on with pre-civilizations, other civilizations on there that had technologies we don't.
So how come we don't ever get how come we don't ever get to hear the truth about any of this stuff?
Because information has always been considered a key component to having power.
Yeah. Too much information on our end. We were not.
That's right. And so, for me, I'm a shareware kind of guy.
Yeah.
You know, sure. The information belongs to the body of man. It isn't intellectual property. I don't believe in that kind of thing. I know that anything that I've ever done is probably not original. The holographic concept of reality, while I'm being credited for that, I remember walking in 1967. I was in the experimental research station it was called in Wilmington, Delaware, and all these different scientists were there for DuPont. And I'm walking down the hall, and I looked in this laboratory as I'm walking by, and there was a three-dimensional color TV. Absolutely happening. There it is. Boom, like that. That was Gaber's lab. A guy named Gaber. That's where I came up with the concept of hologram. The original hologram was a two-dimensional interference pattern that when coherent light went through it, would create a three-dimensional image. I took that concept from the physical plane and extended it by stating that a hologram is n dimensions of information compressed into n-1 dimensions. It's the way information falls into or out of itself. And if you choose to look at a universe from that point of view, now you could see the DNA being, and I wrote that as embryonic holography. I suggested that the DNA is a three-dimensional hologram of force space. Who you were, who you are, and who you will be. And it included time. And today, 40 years later, I am suggesting that the brain, in the non-local mind, book I'm writing, that the brain is a four-dimensional hologram of five space, which means you can change the moving. And this has to do, again, with something outside of time, where you collapse down into singularities all the different, Ryans, because there's a, multiverse of Ryans out there. Some have green hair, some are female, whatever. And what you've done is you've collapsed it down into singularity, and you've expanded one of them using consciousness as the reality at that moment. And they're all real, but the one you put your thought in